Hey folks, welcome back to Only the Best Fantasy Novels. My name is Robin, and today I want to talk about The Liberation, the finale to the Alchemy Wars series, and the ending, a solid ending to what's been an absolute dark horse of a series. I just randomly decided to jump in on the Library of Alexandria's read along for this trilogy, and doing just that random decision was one of the best ones I ever made because this trilogy is good. Like, this is now easily one of my favorite series out there. But yeah, let me get into what this particular book is about. The Clackers are now free, and the world, the status quo of the world as we knew it is basically at an end. History has been all about since the invention of the Clackers. History has been all about the conflicts between the Dutch and the French, and these are petty human concerns now that the Clackers are free, and neither society quite has the capacity to function the way it used to previously. Even though the French themselves, they never had the reliance on the Clackers, which are very much a Dutch invention and a Dutch proprietary technology. The societies are forever altered by this fact that the Clackers are no longer a component of their conflict, essentially. But it does beg the question: is the revolution going to? Is the rebellion of the Clackers going to succeed and become a revolution? So there's that. Um, as as with all books, one of my favorite things to talk about, and one of the first things I nearly always talk about, is just the characters. And I really want to dive straight into that first of all. First and foremost of the POVs, we have Daniel, who gives us an insider view at the emerging Clacker society, as as a people they've never had a culture or an identity of their own. That we were aware of, at least, as they slowly gain freedom and will and begin to make these choices and decisions for themselves, and they prove to be as interesting as humans can be sometimes in that regard. Like, we see factions begin to emerge. We see individuals even within those particular factions who go against the horde. All of these things are just touched on, and we get a fascinating view at what Daniel's position in this brave new world is, because Daniel is very much a significant figure for these clackers, given his role in their liberation. And then we have Bernice, who, given how unlikable she started out as a character, like, I'm actually shocked to say she was one of my favorite POVs, both of the second book and now this third book. She's just been so entertaining to read. Like, she's had, despite how she started out with a very antagonistic and kind of evil feel to her, compared to the a very negative feel to her compared to the other POVs. It's kind of interesting how engaging her story has been, from not just from the second book but also this one, with how she kind of steps back into a role that she previously had, and how she goes about grappling with this new change in the world and what it means. She's never quite been heroic or altruistic, as she very much has her own agenda and her own like motivations for doing what she does, and as a result of that, she can come across a bit despicable. But she does have an absolutely entertaining internal dialogue. It just keeps you engaged and going. Like, she's just fun to read. That's what it boils down to. She's just fun to read. And then we have a new POV who I'm not going to name. I'll leave that as a surprise. But I will say it's one of the more antagonistic figures of the entire series. And through this new POV, we get a first-hand look at the collapse of the Dutch society, as their way of life and the world that they've built for the last couple of hundred years completely collapses under them. And it's every bit as violent, shocking, terrible, and traumatic as you would expect for them. They this new the internal monologue of this character as they navigate this whole situation, it's very despicable, similar to how Berenice's can be, but in this case, they're very much a person you want to hate, and you love to hate very much, because their thought process doesn't just extend to clackers, but even the humans around them and the whole situation. Like, it's just when bad things happen to them, you revel in it as a result of how despicable this particular person is. But yeah, like over the course of this book and through these different characters, like, and as we get to see the emerging class of society and all of that, like the themes that have been very present throughout these three books, the previous two books are still very much here. We have the concepts of humanity, like what does it mean to be a person, what does it mean to be a human, and that kind of thing, and free will. They're played with. We have we have the typical responses to the collapse of our way of life, when with some of the tulips and the way that they can't fathom, they can't comprehend the new situation, the new world order they're faced with, and it's like I can think of very similar parallels that would have had in like our world history, when a liberated people have this freedom and this agency that they never had, and the refusal of the people who used to be ostensibly superior to the liberated ones. They now find their positions and their way of life threatened. Of course, it's a very different scenario here because the clackers like the clackers can end any conflict in a very violent, very definitive fashion. So it's that kind of interaction, it can be every bit as off-putting as you would think, and every bit as off-putting and almost difficult to read. But it was a necessary inclusion, and one that I was happy to see included here. Like it was a nice touch to this story. Like the bigotry and all of that you would expect, it's there. And as very much happens in real life, like it's interesting to see the shapes people will twist themselves into to justify their to justify their what they deem to be their superiority or their station in life as compared to everyone else. It's I have books like these just reinforce for me that there's very little hope for humanity as a species. Yeah, anyway, that's a whole discussion for another time. Moving on. As to the actual plot of the book, the actual sequence of events, whatever, honestly, this one felt a bit more chaotic for me because obviously you have the collapse of the civilization, you have the major powers reeling from what's happened, and everyone's just kind of finding their new way through this and discovering what this revolution means. So the book, it kind of starts off that way and it never quite relents. Like even as things just start to unfold very rapidly, and the world becomes just very dangerous very fast, it never quite gets to slow down, and it just builds and builds and builds until there's this just a lot of tension and a lot of like suspense to see how is this going to end, how badly, how could this possibly end in a way that is going to be anywhere near positive for anyone that we are rooting for, essentially. It's a good ending. I don't personally, I don't think it's my favorite of the series, but it was a really good way to wrap up this series overall, I think. And this whole situation, like reading this whole situation, especially what's going on in our world right now, as AI becomes very much more a part of reality. And I don't mean random people on the internet using generative AI to generate cat pictures and memes and garbage to put on social media. I mean very much AI used in the business context to like just fuel innovation and fuel systems and processes and these kind of things. This book is very much a timely warning, I think, because over reliance on technology is very much a major component of what happens in this world. Because the Dutch, in this depiction of it, after the Dutch invented clackers, the clackers became such an ingrained part of their society that for the most arbitrary and pointless things you could think of, they would just have a clacker do it. And so when that crutch was ripped out from them, they were incapable. They were completely incapable of functioning as a society, and many of them even functioning as human beings, like in terms of what they lost in terms of knowledge and scientific progress and all of these things, all of that completely gets wiped out. And as we become more and more dependent, as we in the real world become more and more dependent on like emerging technologies, like I mentioned AI specifically, but there's so many others you can apply this situation to. It makes you wonder what would happen to us if that crutch gets ripped out. Frankly, I think the death toll would be very high, because when you think of how you use technology today to do anything, how would you even survive that particular scenario? Like the death toll would be extremely high, especially in urban centers. Like there's no going around that. Especially when you consider things like the way modern sanitation and these kind of things are becoming more and more automated. When those things break down and diseases become, I'm going off on a complete tangent here, but you get the idea. Like the over reliance on technology, like we're talking about a completely, we're playing with like we're very much playing with the complete and utter destruction of society if we're not very careful. And that's very much something that this book is epitomizes brilliantly. And it's something that it really makes you stop and think that maybe those people who build bunkers in the woods, maybe they're onto something. Hear me out, maybe they're onto something. So yeah, like a really fun, interesting book, a good way to end the series. Not necessarily a perfect one, but a good one. And a series that is just going to dwell in my brain for a very long time to come. But yeah, I think that's all I really have to say about The Rising. The Liberation. If you made it this far into the video, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.